exploring culture, society, and civilization through ideas that inform, inspire, and grow. Hi, let me begin today with a quiet reflection. Please think of your grandparents. Think of the stories they told you when you were young, the language they spoke at home, the prayers, the proverbs, the small rituals that shaped everyday life of yours then. Now shift your attention slowly and think of your school, the textbooks there, the history chapters that were taught to you, the language you were told was important for you, the version of India you were taught that was said to be modern. Now, by any chance, did these two worlds always feel connected in your hearts? Or did they feel slightly apart? Many of us grew up standing between these two Indias. One lived in our memory, the other lived in our institutions. What was it that separated them? Tonight, I want to ask you that simple question, which has begun to surface openly in our country and among Indians across the world. The question is, who shaped the idea of modern India after independence? And equally importantly, were there voices that were not fully heard in that shaping up process? This is a question that demands honest consideration and analysis, because nations, like individuals, must occasionally pause and reflect on how they became who they currently are. When India became independent in 1947, we inherited freedom. Yes, political power changed hands, but the system as such, that largely remained the same. The bureaucracy, the legal system, the educational and academic models, and above all, English, the language of governance. All of these had deep colonial roots and imprints and retained institutional memories of the colonial Raj and establishment. This is something that we must never forget. And at the center of all of this governance and political continuity was a powerful group we often describe as the westernized elites of our nation. Now, we have to be careful here somewhat, though. This term is not an insult, it's not a pejorative labeling, it is not a categorization or grouping of any sort. It is, however, a historical reality with continuing present day implications after all. This group, our westernized elites, did not emerge accidentally post 1947. It was an early creation of the British colonial rulers to act as intermediaries between themselves and the vast Indian masses. This elite was to collaborate with the British administration to promote all the devious interests of the Raj, naturally, and to additionally promote, if possible, the Western civilizational framework as the superior option for native Indians to adopt, if possible, in perpetuity. As the elites of the colonial establishment, they remained emotionally and psychologically cut off from the masses. That was indeed a key mandate and format of the British dispensation at that time. Now, cut to 1947. The influence of this elite was cemented with the following features. English education opened all the doors for them. Access to institutions created every bit of opportunity. Proximity to power sustained their influence and it grew them. Many among them became lawyers, civil servants, jurists, academics, journalists, and so on. To be fair to them, though, they were deeply patriotic. They wanted India to succeed. They worked for stability and progress. They built institutions that stood the test of time. They managed diversity in a nascent republic. They kept India democratic when many, especially in the West, predicted imminent collapse. In fact, in those fragile early days, they did play a crucial role in holding the country together. But however, History is never one dimensional. Every choice, every decision comes with trade offs. And one of the biggest trade offs was this: how was India to imagine her own vision of modernity? Under Jawaharlal Nehru, the cosmopolite, these westernized elites aligned fluidly and easily with his vision of quote unquote modern India, i.e., a scientific, secular, and modern republic. That sounds admirable, but here was the tension. In the rush towards modernity, much of India's civilization inheritance was deemed to be of questionable value or utility, even to be sidelined and avoided. Of course, certainly not to be owned afresh and reinterpreted. This disavowal was pronounced and became systemically fashionable those days. Nehru's disapproval of President Rajendra Prasad's presence in the restoration ritual of the historic Somnath temple was a formal declaration of that big intent. This led to the following trends in our public narrative then and now. Tradition became synonymous with backwardness. Religion became something to be kept private. Indigenous knowledge systems became culture and not just intellect. The message, sometimes subtle, sometimes explicit, was thus: India's future lies elsewhere, in Western models and academia, in Western frameworks and their universals, and slowly, an organic divide began to grow. On the one side of the divide was an English speaking urban elite that controlled institutions all over the place: bureaucracy, universities, media, judiciary, and so on. On the other was the vast majority of Indians rooted in regional languages, oral traditions and customs, local histories, and so on. They had neither influence nor resources. These masses voted, participated, they worked hard, they built the country brick by brick. But sadly, culturally, most of them felt unheard and unseen. Indian languages were tolerated, but rarely empowered. Western theorists and academicians became mandatory reading in universities. Indian thinkers and writers became optional. Again, this is not an argument against learning from the West, not at all. India has always and will always learn from the world across the board. But it is the structural imbalance that mattered here. When one lens becomes universal and the other becomes parochial, imbalance begins to grow. Over decades, this gap has only deepened and widened starkly. Large sections of society began to feel that the official version of quote unquote modern India did not fully reflect their lived reality. And when political movements later began expressing that sentiment, many elites saw in it an emotional and regressive development. This was sad. Now, history has moved all over again. In the last 2 decades, regional media has grown powerful. Social media has democratized narrative authority. Voices once patronized are now speaking for themselves. This transition has created a lot of discomfort. We must then ask ourselves, is this unhealthy or undesirable? Or is this opening up of the intellectual space per se? Monopoly feels stable and even comforting. Plurality appears noisy but is organic and healthy. Here is where we need wisdom in large doses. It would be a mistake to swing to the opposite extreme in a hurry. Rejecting everything Western is not maturity at all. Romanticizing our past, on the other hand, without critique, is not wisdom either. Civilizations do not grow through reaction, they grow through assimilation and integration over long periods. India's future does not lie in choosing between tradition and modernity as a binary. It lies in synthesizing them, in allowing Indian languages to stand alongside English. We are making a huge progress. In treating indigenous knowledge systems as living frameworks and not museum exhibits, we are moving further. In decentralizing intellectual authority, we are taking a further step. In recognizing that there can be multiple visions of progress, we are living the Indian civilizational ethos. India is too vast and complex for a single worldview or template. And here I speak specifically and especially to Indians in the diaspora across the world. You folks carry multiple inheritances. You live between worlds. Perhaps you understand better than most of us that identity does not need to be a zero sum game, especially in the reductionist, sweeping sense that global power elites sometimes push for it to be. India does not become any smaller or parochial when she remembers herself more fully and substantively. She only becomes stronger. Our westernized elite no doubt played an important role in stabilizing the nascent republic. That contribution stands. We are not denying that. But the next phase of India's journey cannot be stewarded principally by this one class alone. It must be a representative and participatory journey, confident and self aware and self contained. The true sign of a mature civilization is that it can examine itself without fear or favor. Now, returning to our original question, who shaped modern India? The answer is layered, complex, and nuanced. But the more important question to ask is this: who will now shape India's next chapter? That chapter is not being written, according to me, in one language, not in one city or one institution. It is being written in our aspiring villages and many, many new metros, in classrooms and startups, in universities and colleges, in temples and laboratories, in Delhi and Dubai, in Chennai and California. The task before us is to objectively revisit the past 75 years, to redefine and build from them and on them and behind them. Let me then conclude thus: the future of India will not be written by any narrow elitist voices, but by a civilization multitude who remember who we are and are not ashamed to live by that. And that is a journey worthy of all of us Indians in India and abroad. This is Sundaresan signing off. Thank you.